Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Stages of a Successful RFID Deployment from Discovery to Implementation. Two housekeeping points before we get started. The session is being recorded and you will receive a link over the next few days. Secondly, please submit your questions throughout the presentation in the Q&A section, and we will be addressing these towards the end of the webinar. Barcode Group is a leading provider of barcode, mobile computing, and RFID solutions. Our solution platforms bring together hardware, software, supplies, and support. RFID is now able to identify up to 1,000 items per second in a range of a few inches to several yards away without direct line of sight. The real-time visibility this solution creates has opened a world of possibilities for organizations of all sizes. But what is entailed in deploying RFID? To discuss how RFID can improve your organization's accuracy and efficiency, we couldn't ask for two better speakers to explore this topic with you. As a senior solutions architect with the Barcode Group, Christopher Facilos leads pre-sales discussions with AIDC customers, focusing on RFID solutions. He's in charge of project discovery and definition, and shapes system architecture, including hardware, software, tag, and service components. Nat Hillary is a solutions engineer at Impinj, with more than a decade of experience designing, implementing, and deploying Impinj product-based RFID solutions across a range of customers and industries. Nat's primary focus is on supporting Impinj partners in pre-sales activities. Thanks for joining us today, Chris and Nat. Please take it away, Chris.
Thank you very much, Edwin. For starters, we have a poll that we'd like everyone to participate in, and that just will give us a little bit of insight as far as where everyone is in their exploration or use of RFID. So please go ahead and answer any of those four answers, and in a moment we'll have those results. In the meantime, just a quick introduction to what Barcodes Inc. has done with RFID. We do have, with our Barcodes group, over 20,000 dock door solutions deployed globally, along with many other RFID solutions. And again, you know, we can bring together all of those components. So as Edwin brought in the introduction, what we're focused on is the complete solution. And maybe Nat, you know, we work very closely with Impinj, one of our top manufacturer partners, and really the leader in the RFID space for passive UHF RFID.
And Impinj is here, and specifically I and my partner Mike are here to help support Barcodes in the pursuit of RFID business. So we bring the technical knowledge of RFID, the Impinj products, and just our experience more than anything in addressing real customer problems. So we have Barcodes back, and we're helping make sure that Barcodes delivers absolutely the best solution to address your problems.
Oh, and the results are in. So as this is coming up, the question, is your business currently using RFID? It looks like 3/4 of the participants today are not currently using it, but it is of interest. And then it's kind of spread out. There's some respondents said that it's successfully implemented already, some expansion, and some are just here to kind of learn, maybe see if there's some inspiration. We have a few folks who said, you know, it's not necessarily a current project. Well, thank you all for participating. And I just want to quickly go over the agenda today, is that this also kind of covers our process. So these are, what problems are you trying to solve? Can RFID solve your problem? Is a good fit? Does RFID fit your organization? And reading RFID tags at your facility, and then talking about the pilot phase of RFID implementation. So the first question is, what problem are you trying to solve? And this is in our roadmap, the discovery call most frequently. Sometimes it includes or starts with an on-site visit. And during that discovery, what we're really trying to do is exchange knowledge and learn about our customers' needs and what particular problem we're trying to solve. What does that mean? It means, are we looking to solve a problem with efficiency? Is that one example? What we're trying to gain, is it that there's a specific problem, something's missing, cleaning up data, accuracy, or is it that there might be some data that's not collected at all currently that would be invaluable to an organization? So there are a number of different areas that we focus on, and we see a lot of traction. And it also tends to be, our client base are oftentimes focused on logistics, transportation, warehousing, flow of goods, and what exactly is that? So some examples out there could be that we're trying to avoid chargebacks, and we want shipment verification, right? And that might be a common example and a great use case for RFID at a dock door, for example. And of course, Nat, as you might comment on, there are almost unlimited potential use cases. And so this all starts with a discovery where we're trying to understand the current process, the facilities, the goods that are potentially being tracked. And it could be goods, people, assets that are fixed. RFID can track a lot.
Yes, and one of the reasons that this is such an important question is a lot of customers come to us with this concept that they have to apply RFID tags to everything. They've got to have readers everywhere in order to achieve their business objectives. And that's not always the case. So having a clear understanding of the problem helps us focus in on what kind of viable solution we can bring to bear. And a lot of that is based on experience. And one of the things that I think is most key about this problem, or this question, is being able to enumerate the problem. How much does this particular issue cost your organization every year? How much a chargeback's worth? I know, for instance, on the manufacturing side in retail, most contracts have a chargeback against the manufacturer for when shippings are incorrect. I know no not manufacturers, but no distribution centers for the brand name garment manufacturers who are exercising that chargeback because they simply don't have the means of assessing the products coming in to know whether that shipment is accurate. So being able to enumerate the problem so that there's a clear value to the organization, and if nothing else, return on investment for the application of RFID to the problem. This is where creating a clear understanding of that starts as well.
And as part of that discovery, making sure that it is a fit. So I feel, and that kind of flows into the next part of our agenda, can RFID solve your problem?
Yeah.
So during that discovery call, what we really want to identify is, does RFID work? And what we're bringing to the table is knowledge about how the technology works. And we will collect a lot of specific information. We'll ask a lot of questions because RFID as a technology, it fits in certain places, and in other places it does not. So we will be the first ones to tell you, both Nat and I as a solutions architect, that if it's not a good fit, if it will not perform as necessary, then that's the end. And that's one of the reasons why the focus of the discovery and this part, can it solve your problem, is truly to understand, will it work and return the ROI, solve that problem? Because if it doesn't, we don't want to continue down the road and spend our customers' time spending time exchanging more information on that topic. If it makes sense to pivot to another tracking technology, or perhaps recommend a different process change with the existing technology that's deployed, we will be the first ones to let you know that, based on our experience. And there are times when during that discovery call, we can identify immediately that the aim of or the problem we're trying to solve cannot be solved with RFID, at least at a reasonable cost.
Yeah, and I think for us, we're here to solve your problem. And we're not here to oversell you on a given technology. If we don't have a solution that meets your problem, there's no point in us proceeding any further. And I think that just in terms of a contract between us and you, our customers, that's key, because it's a source of trust for us. So a lot of times when it comes to solving problems, RFID and the application of RFID is, how would I put it? It's experience based. There's a lot of things that you can do with RFID, and there's a lot of way out solutions out there. And what we bring to bear is a lot of that knowledge and experience about how to solve problems, but also that knowledge and experience also allows us to constrain the problem space, to recognize what's in a viable product space, problem space, and what's not.
And I like to make the comment and give a little bit of a list of the types of questions in case anyone who's participating in this webinar would like to engage with us on a one-on-one consultation sometime in the future. Beyond just having a description of what is the problem, and that might be, we want to avoid chargebacks. It may be a common one. We load entire skids on the wrong trucks. We put the FedEx skid on the UPS truck and vice versa. So there's so much of that. But when it starts to come down to what other questions are we going to be asking you about, especially when it's not as straightforward as I want to track a pallet level with RFID, which is frequently a very successful RFID application, when it comes down to I want to track other items. I want to perform work in process tracking as items are manufactured. We're going to be asking you about your space. We're going to be asking you about your workers. What the processes are. We're going to be asking you specifics about the materials of the items that you want to apply RFID tags to. The density, how they're packed on pallets or on racking, if we need to do that. So pictures and answering questions verbally, maps, asking questions. Sometimes for some applications, it could work, but we're told in the end, and you may have 1/4 inch of space on my product to mark with an RFID tag. And although those tags exist, the read range might not be there for the application. So we're going to drill through all of these very specific applications. And also, we will ask questions about where does the data need to go. But again, our process is going to be initially focused on evaluating that performance. And if we work with you in the future, these are all kind of in the worksheet of what we want to go through to fully understand what you are and apply our knowledge of, does that seem like a good fit? Home run, it's going to work. We're not sure, or identify, in this instance, it might not be a good fit.
So the next question is, does RFID fit in your organization? So it seems like a strange question. So let me put it into context. In my experience, when it comes to applying technology into an organization to solve specific problems, you have to consider what I think of as the three-legged stool. You've got to consider the people, the process, and the technology, and how it's all going to fit in. And there are so many different elements to that. So for instance, starting with the people, I have met with organizations and the managers of the organizations have a specific idea, a lot of times an enumerated idea about how RFID can really help them solve a specific problem. But they then have an idea that, oh, if we just add this step to the process, then everything will be fine. The problem is they're adding a step that can either compromise the ergonomics of the operators or reduce their productivity. And I've seen quite a few RFID installations live fallow simply because the people who are actually directly affected by RFID weren't consulted as part of the process, and they simply didn't use it. I've even seen other installations where the employees actively went out to compromise the RFID system by breaking actually breaking the equipment. Where process is concerned, it's key to make sure that you're including RFID at the right point in the process and you understand the value that the data brings to your process. Going back to what I was saying, about blanketing everything with RFID tags, blanking everything with readers. You can do that. I've seen people do that, but the big thing isn't being able to read everything. It's being able to read everything at the right time so that it has meaning. What I think of as business information, business critical events. Am I interested in the fact that there's a tag here? Or am I interested in the fact that this tag moved from the loading dock into a truck? It's part of an outbound shipment. It made it onto the right truck and everything is good. Or, and this is what a lot of people are interested in, it made it onto the wrong truck and we need to raise an alert before that truck leaves. Those are examples of the processes that we're interested in. So making sure that the RFID fits into the process of your organization as a complement to that is key. And then from a technology perspective, integrating the data that RFID brings to bear into the process, that's a key component. Going back to what I was saying about business events, the RFID data in and of itself is seldom useful in isolation. It's useful in context. So applying the right data processing, for want of a better description, to make sure that you are actually registering business critical events meaningful to the business, to the back-end system. That's an example of where technology comes into it. And it can be as mundane as well, where technology is concerned as, do I even have the networking to support this infrastructure, this ecosystem? And a lot of people come to me with a budget, and they have a budget for RFID, but then they start looking at the networking or the electrical systems or the structural systems that are necessary to implement an RFID solution. And the budget they need for those are sometimes as much as 10 times more than the budget for the RFID system. So in terms of making sure the RFID fits into your organization, it's answering those questions: people, process, technology. And one of the things I find interesting, though, is when people do start, people being customers, when they do start using RFID and they have a successful deployment, they then start looking outwards and where else can we apply RFID? And retail is a perfect example. RFID for inventory and retail has been a successful deployment, probably one of the most successful deployments in RFID's history, and it's driven the market for many years. But now those same retailers are starting to look upstream and say, hey, we've got this information, we've got these tags, can we take advantage of it upstream? So they're looking for and finding more and more places where RFID can be applied throughout the supply chain. Compliance, the manufacturer compliance is a perfect example of the kind of value they're looking for upstream. So answering those three questions really helps to identify the right place to apply RFID and gives you the opportunity for growth as well.
And that's great. I'd add in getting buy-in from boots on the ground. And just to stress that is important. It's the forklift drivers, it's the people doing all of the put away picking in the warehouse, it's the nurses in healthcare facilities. You know, if the boots on the ground, if that process doesn't make their lives easier, we need to identify that and make sure that it fits into those processes, right? So absolutely. Which, and also moves into what we feel is it is tied into that, because does it fit your organization? And this gets its entire bullet point in the agenda. Will they reading tags in your facility, right? Because this is one of those challenges, and sometimes even after discovery and after gathering pictures and after having a lot of time invested by both the client and our teams, certain things might not become apparent until we are able to visit a facility. And oftentimes the people that we're working with themselves do not necessarily visit those facilities frequently, and certainly not through all the different processes and shifts. And they might not see how business is actually conducted with the variety of process. They might think a process works one way, but in reality, it isn't. So, you know, part of this process is we move through discovery. We identify what if it will work. We try to establish it can solve the problem as we're moving this down. Then we also have to decide, really start to get to the point where we do some kind of testing, right? And this is something that Barcodes Incorporated does as part of our services, is that if necessary for certain applications, we will come on site and perform studies and document performance to help establish what the right hardware is, what the right tags are, what processes might need to change, and really try to establish and a picture in our clients' minds about how this is actually going to perform, what it's going to look like when it's deployed. And that all has to happen on site, because we run into so many scenarios where you might not see the problem. A great example is how frequently it is that we are asked to, for example, read a certain number of cartons that are packed on a pallet as they pass through a dock door. And we do testing in a lab, and we do testing on site, and we're working on it. And then when you get the forklift drivers, say, all right, we've tagged everything up, we have everything tuned, we had some, all right, just do your work like you would normally do your work. And then maybe they stack up 10 skids in a row on the way to the dock door, and then they push all 10 of them into the truck at once. So now we're not reading 150 tags in a second as it drives by in a forklift. We're reading that times 8, and maybe even double that as they're stacked too high as someone pushes them. And that's the kind of and we might ask those questions. Part of Nat and my experiences from telephone and on-site work is to learn to ask those questions and advise, even leading up to our on-site visits, for the stakeholders that are driving the project from our client side, to make sure they're monitoring this and asking questions, and make sure that the processes really are what they think they are. I'm sure you run into that too, Nat.
I do, and there's some more pragmatic sides to it as well. The operational side, how the tags are going to be used, how RFID is envisaged. It's very important to understand that. But I've found some sublime issues that you could only ever identify as something that needs to be addressed by being on site. For instance, I was working with a customer, and they had a wireless telephone system in the warehouse. And the wireless telephone system, they've had it for 15 years, also worked on the same frequency as the RFID. And their lifeblood was this telephone system. Whenever they turned on the RFID system, the telephone system stopped working. So it could be as simple as that, right? Those are the issues that we need to understand about deploying RFID in your facility, not just what the tag choices are, not just what the reader location is, not just how it fits into the process, how the data is going to get back into your backend systems to answer your business questions. It's the practicalities. Are there environment considerations that we need to be aware of? In other words, when we apply a tag, are you going to be washing this thing at some point? In the medical industry, for instance, wash down is very, very important. So when you tag something, you have to make sure that the tag itself can live up to the environment of being washed down, for instance. So a lot of those questions can only really be asked by visiting the facility and looking at, in your specific facility, what are the areas of concern that we need to come up with answers for to make sure that RFID is successful for you.
Absolutely. And even things that seem simple, as a comment on that too, can become more nuanced. And at a bare minimum, if it's not something that makes RFID too challenging, it's something to solve for. So for example, correct, frequently we are in a facility with what we feel is, again, our bread and butter, shipment verification at dock doors, and we even have photos. But once we get on site, we find that perhaps there's a large metal wall by the last dock door, and that's not a problem that we can't solve, but it is something we need to solve for. It could be that somehow we missed that half of the dock doors have dock plates and half don't, and that can actually affect the configuration and the antenna configuration and power settings for that. So there's, it might not be that every dock door gets the same configuration, for example.
Exactly.
And moving on to pilot. So what we try to move to is from discovery to budgeting. And then we have this proof of concept, which we work with the customer to define that proof of concept. Sometimes it's their testing, perhaps the entire application is a handheld application, and therefore, hey, here's a demo unit, here's some tags, and here's some help. Sometimes it's a formal study where we come on site. And once we know that the RFID performance works, we now have to flush out the rest of this. And that can include additional hardware and processes, printing, if you're using labels that are RFID tags, where they get printed. And of course, there's the software component. Oftentimes we are deploying a middle layer, and we are integrating with existing WMS, ERP, MRP platforms. And so that's all part of it. Once we have gotten to a point where all of that is approved, the ROI is there, the process can be ironed out and defined. The testing has been done, so we know that the tag reads will perform as necessary. We still advise in many scenarios that there's a pilot, because we also find that in a large organization, we always want to make sure that everything goes well, and so many things don't present themselves until the system is deployed. So a pilot phase would be something where perhaps there's multiple locations, or even there could be a very large investment. Perhaps you have a facility with 100 dock doors, but perhaps a pilot phase would be for 5 dock doors. And perhaps it would be, we're just going to start making sure that just the FedEx trucks are going to be tracked as a pilot to really prove this out, test it, to kick the tires, to make sure that anything that is exposed that we might have missed, and that might, especially for larger investments. So that pilot phase, we would expect that the software is functioning. We actually have the actual bill of materials, the actual readers, the actual tags, and then actually let it run for some period of time that is defined and agreed upon from our team and with our clients, so that they have that information and they can really start to see that ROI. And sometimes that pilot is short, because sometimes the ROI is so obvious, it wants to go quick. Let's roll it out to all the sites. Let's do all the rest of the dock doors. But other times there may be something that's exposed where we want to tweak the software, for example, tweak a process, or invest in some additional training if it finds out, as Nat was talking about, that everything works amazingly well. However, we need to make sure that everyone is following the process.
Agreed. And the pilot process is so key to. The way I look at it is all the questions up until the pilot answer, essentially identify a list of things that you need to have answers for before you can move forward. And what the pilot does is give you the means of answering those questions. So it's like, okay, if we can do X, Y, and Z, we can verify that this particular deployment is viable. And the pilot is key to answering those questions to make that decision, help drive that decision.
I know we're running out of time, but my last comment is, I think that an average pace to get all the way through a large scale deployment through the end of a pilot is probably, you're looking at 6 months plus from that first telephone call to that pilot. The fastest deployments I've seen can certainly be in 2 to 3 months if the application is a known quantity, for example. But it is unreasonable to go from no experience to broad deployment in anywhere less than 3 to 6 months, I'd say.
Well, thank you very much, Chris and Nat, for sharing your insights. And when I prepared with you, you both told me that each of these topics could be at least an hour, and I can see it. But hopefully this gives you a little taste of RFID and how deployment might work. And I see a lot of questions coming in. A lot of them are specific to your situation. So if you have any interest in pursuing that and talking to people like Chris and his team, feel free to reach out to any of the numbers on the screen. And we'll definitely be following up and getting you scheduled. So we have some answers coming in. I know we also reached the bottom of the hour, so if you have to leave, thank you for being here. If you can stay a little longer and you're interested in seeing some of these questions answered by Chris and Nat, they have graciously accepted to stay a little longer. So let's do that. So the first question, and a lot of them are kind of specific to the individual, but I'll try to see if I can make it a little broader. Like, is there any temperature restriction on RFID? The question came in related to we store product in minus 80 Celsius freezers.
Go ahead, Chris.
Minus 80 is pretty low. Have you done any minus 80? Right now, I've got a project going on with negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit. The tags can read fine in that environment. The problem is the gear. It's actually so cold that reading in that environment, but the tag's surviving at negative 10. I know there's cryo-cool adhesive out there as one possible topic. So the adhesive works. Negative 80 might actually be low enough. I think on a spec sheet, and I can look it up, I think it's minus 32 is the survivability temp. Is that right, Nat? That's pretty common. There's some
for
specialty
humans
tags.
or for tags.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have seen applications at that level, but at those kind of temperatures, but they're very much the exception rather than the norm, and they have to be treated very, very carefully. So Chris is right. The equipment itself, for the solutions I've seen, for instance, tracking biological samples, the equipment has been outside of the freezer, and only the antenna and the tags are inside of the freezer. So there are some manufacturers who do extreme temperature tags, and the adhesive is a perfect example. And there are two levels to the adhesive for the tag to whatever is being monitored, and also the adhesive between the actual tag integrated circuit and the inlay, which is the antenna. That also needs consideration. And the thing about an inlay at those temperatures, it becomes very, very brittle. So that impacts how you actually apply it and the range of things that you can actually apply RFID to make it meaningful at that point. Because if it's brittle and you bend it too much, you break the antenna, the tag doesn't work. So it increases your rate of attrition, if you like.
And to flush that out on the top end, I believe that the survivability temp can really go up with specialty tags, but the reading temp, the performing temp is about 130 degrees Fahrenheit is the maximum temperature that even tags that survive 400 degrees Fahrenheit, they don't read at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. They can read, and there is a relationship between getting hot and the read range reducing. So, you know, pretty much if it's hotter than a human being can survive in, the reading performance is going to be very poor. I mean, it's a good rule to think about when it comes to the high end of that temperature. I know that wasn't a question, but we might as well flush out both ends of it.
So connection and space issues that may lead to RFID not being a good solution. Do you have examples, or are most of the warehouses well set up to take on RFID?
Well, I just like to make the comment that it can be challenging in certain scenarios if the desire is to have a live map with multi-tier racks. The space can make it challenging. There are some specialty technologies that could potentially monitor it. But I will also just make the comment that it's really about the return on investment. You know, can you do it? I think the answer is yes. And if you ask me, can I get down to a bin level location with hands-off tracking? My answer is yes. How many millions are you guys willing to spend? All right, because we can get down at a bare minimum, closest antenna. So if you're willing to put an antenna for every single bin location in your facility and spend that kind of money, that scenario. And believe it or not, there are people who do it, but they typically don't have million-square-foot facilities. That might make work when you have cages with high value assets and you have a small corner. You may indeed want to get down to that location, and that investment and that return on investment is worth it. There are some specialty technologies out there where the space can, make it difficult to implement. And I'd say contact us and let's talk through it. Let's see your space and let's set up an appointment with the sales rep. They'll pull us in and we'll be able to tackle that.
Yeah, I've seen some interesting challenges where connectivity is concerned. One of the growth areas for RFID, which it's characterized by connectivity challenges, is yard management. You've got a bunch of trucks in a yard, and a lot of times yard management is associated with scheduling the trucks to a specific delivery. So they want to know what trailers are out there so that they can schedule them. So knowing what trailers are there, a lot of people are interested in using RFID for it. But the connectivity, especially Wi-Fi connectivity, when you're out in the yard, especially when you get in and amongst all these big metal trailers, can be a bit of a challenge. So it's a solution that, or a problem for which there are a number of different solutions, including drones. I've seen people use drones to monitor the yard, and also putting RFID readers on just a tender that drives around and reports back what tags it sees as a specific GPS location.
But it's a great example. If the GPS signal isn't good there in a rural location, then that accuracy of the slotting is not going to exactly. So it certainly it is case by case. It has to be evaluated case by case.
Yep, exactly.
A couple of questions came in regarding compatibility, especially with SAP. Could you touch on maybe compatibility on a high level, and maybe touch on SAP compatibility?
Yes, we have integrated with SAP many times in many deployments. Of course, understanding exactly what business logic you want to apply, that is a case by case basis. SAP is a monster. And I would say the same thing for other large. I mean, we've integrated with so many large platforms, and SAP is one of those ones where it's been done, but each one may still end up being a custom integration. It depends on what the needs are and what data we're moving around.
I'll also point out that there are a couple of different, when I think of SAP and ERP in general, there are a couple of different aspects that I think are important to call out. First of all, I know of no ERP system that tracks things at the item level. In the ERP, you're tracking 10 red shirts. You're not tracking this shirt, that shirt, that shirt, that shirt. It's just a bundle of 10 shirts. It doesn't matter which shirts those are, just a bundle of 10 shirts. But RFID is going to tell you what each of those shirts is. So most ERP systems don't have that placeholder for the data in order to make that data, to consume it. Second is the business logic. Just inserting RFID into SAP is not enough. You need to understand what the meaning of that data is. How does it influence things? What decisions is the ERP system going to make? What decisions do the operators, the people making decisions based on the ERP, what are they going to be? What decisions do they need to make? How can RFID help with those decisions? So it's a key to understand how RFID is going to affect the ERP decisions to make sure that you integrate the RFID data at the right point in the system.
So what do tags commonly store? And the question relates to lot number, fill codes. What do you see, or is it really custom dependent on the customer situation?
So there, I'll start with specific answer and then talk a little bit about where the industry is going. So I've seen many different tag encoding schemas to try and capture all that information. But the RAIN RFID the standard is managed by an organization named GS1, and they have a number of tag data standards that help to address a lot of the use cases in industry. For instance, the Serialized Global Trade Identification Number, or an SGTIN, is used predominantly in retail for data tagging. When it comes to food, when it comes to medicine, the batch number, the lot number, the use by date, the made on date, they become much more important. And the GS1 recently released a new tag data standard that incorporates a couple of different extensions to the SGTIN concept to help accommodate a lot of those. So there's an SGTIN Plus and a DSGTIN Plus. The difference is the DSGTIN Plus has a date prefix so that you can filter on the date and look for stuff specific to that date. but both of them allow you to store a variable amount of data for your products. It could be just the batch number. It could be the batch number, the made on date, the sell by date, the do not use by date, whatever it is. So they're designed to be flexible and accommodate your specific needs.
And can I make the comment that just to get, for those who are very new, a passive UHF RFID tag, a RAIN tag, has generally 5 memory banks. That's the EPC.
Four.
Well, 4. Well, the 3 memory banks and TID, and then you have user memory, and it can be sliced and diced in different ways to different banks.
Yep.
Typically, we are
Yes.
using the EPC exclusively, except for perhaps inspection applications. That comes up sometimes where you have a one tag read event, and then you might also be re-encoding that tag, and that's fairly rare. For the most part, we're using the EPC memory bank. In general, it's 96-bit or 128-bit. Those are the 2 common cost-effective sizes. There are larger memory banks out there. The standards that Nat was talking about will work with either a 96-bit or 128-bit. So it is all kind of, and by the way, that only translates to 12 ASCII characters to begin with. And all these standards allow us to actually take a lot more data and run them through the decoder ring, and fit a lot more data into that EPC. And as an extension, for anyone still listening, the reason that we like to just use one memory bank is because of optimizing the speed of reads. So that's one of the big things, when people say, well, why don't I put all this information? I want to put so much information. Well, then the question is, am I reading 100 tags coming by in 1 second, or am I reading 1 tag leisurely at a tag event? And that can make a big difference to that advice. And what, we're probably still going to advise you to just work and read with the EPC memory bank, no matter what your application is, and have the rest of that in software, probably the rest of that data, beyond those global standards. But that question about how fast you want to read it is actually part of that conversation about what should the encoder schema be.
Question came in if you can use your existing Wi-Fi network to track RFIDs.
For the communication with the readers, but that's a different frequency. So you've got 900 megahertz, 860 to 960 megahertz is the band for RAIN RFID, and your Wi-Fi is going to be 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz. So they don't talk directly. The tag doesn't talk to the reader unless it's a specialty reader. And I mean, access point. We have seen there's some interesting products in the market space. I don't know of any successful deployments where the access points themselves are reading the 900 megahertz, that territory of frequency. So they might be used to just take data from, say, an impinged reader across your wireless network, but they're not directly communicating with tags.
Yep.
Can I talk? I'd like to address the RF survey, by the way, because I think we're coming to the end, we might wrap up in a minute. What does an RF survey look like? We at Barcodes Incorporated, we're going to write up a statement of work and agree upon what that work is before we perform that study. A typical study is the purpose of the study is to test the reading performance. What does that look like if you hire us? Again, it's worked out, but it usually involves we're bringing a variety of readers as we scope to your particular project on site. That could be multiple antennas, different readers, handheld readers, fixed readers, multiple tags, and engineers coming on site with their own gear. We're temporarily, over a day to a week period, putting up fixed read points. We're testing and documenting, and we're working hand in hand with our clients, with the project leaders, as well as oftentimes it's part of the statement of work. We're going to need forklift drivers, so your team is going to work with us, and we're really going to test that out. And in the end, we're typically writing up some kind of a report that's giving you the results, the recommended bill of materials, the right tag, what performed best, what configuration made it work and achieve the performance. And on the rare occasion where we really, if there's compromises in order to get it to work, here's the process that you're going to have to change, which might be stop staging your gear touching the dock door in between the readers, right? You're going to have to back that up a little bit.
Yep.
Some things like that might go into that too. So I wanted to make sure you all heard that in case you want to engage with us. And that might be what the proof of concept is. It depends on the individual case. Sometimes we're testing in our lab, and that might be all we really needed to do for the proof of concept.
Yes.
And that level work can often identify issues that may require doing things like bringing a spectrum analyzer on site to understand sources of external interference and this is the interesting thing, when those sources of interference occur, because a lot of times they're not consistent. They'll happen at specific times during the day. So identifying when and where and what those sources of interference might be really stems from, first of all, identifying if there's a problem, and then knowing there's a problem so that you can bring the right equipment to answering that question.
But we are wise enough to let you know that if you cover the tags with snow in the parking lot, they're probably not going to read. So we don't know that, we will let you know that before we plan for a study, because if you've always got snow over your tags, and we don't want to knock the snow off and test and tell you that it works great. So
it's true.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks, Chris, on that. There are some other outstanding questions. We'll follow up with you individually on those, so to make sure that your questions are answered. But at this time, I'd like to close the webinar. Thank you so much for those that stayed on longer. I appreciate your attendance. Hopefully this is of interest to you, and we'll be talking to you soon again. And thanks, Chris and Nat, for your contributions. It's marvelous how much you know about RFID, and I know you want to share it with the audience, and I know they appreciate it. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everyone.